Welcome back to Peek into COS. I'm joined by the Chief of Content and Integration Officer from the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Museum, Lindsay Flanagan Huban. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I think our listeners are going to find out that you have a dream job, and we're going to talk about that. But before we get into talking about the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Museum, you're fairly new to Colorado Springs, and I want you to share with listeners how you and your husband ended up here in Olympic City, USA.
Sure. So the main person we have to thank for that is my husband's cousin, Lauren.
Thank you, Lauren.
Lauren sent us an invitation to her wedding back last summer, and I said to Matt, okay, if we're traveling from Florida to Colorado for a wedding, this is going to be our summer vacation. So we came out here for 2 weeks, spent a week in Colorado Springs, a weekend in Fairplay for the wedding, and then a week in Denver.
Okay.
We got back to Florida, and I said, honey, I think I want to live there. And Matt said to me, okay, well, what are you going to do for work? And I said, I don't know. And I went on the American Alliance of Museums job board. And this job at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Museum was open, and I have a background in sports history. I've been in museums for 20 years. And I said, well, I'll do this job.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, well, apply and see what happens. So we came out here for the wedding over 4th of July, and we got in our car and sold our house last week of October and arrived November 1st.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, listeners to this podcast, if they had a dollar for every time they've heard me say that today's tourist is tomorrow's talent, you are an absolute living, breathing example of that. And so Lauren, thank you for getting married and inviting, your husband's cousin and to come. And here you are. I mean, it's been fast. So you've been here now how many months?
3 months. We arrived November 1st.
Okay. And here we are doing a podcast and talking about how you got here. So you were in Tampa for how many years?
I was actually living in St. Pete, but working at a museum in Tampa for 10 years.
Okay. And that was the Henry B. Plant Museum?
That's correct.
Okay. Talk a little bit about that. That's pretty unique.
So the Plant Museum is a really special place. It's housed in the former Tampa Bay Hotel, which is this enormous luxury resort, 511 hotel rooms. It opened in 1891, and it was the crown jewel of Henry Plant's transportation empire of railroads and steamships and hotels. You could travel on his steamships from Nova Scotia to Jamaica or to Key West or to Mobile.
Okay.
And the Tampa Bay Hotel was this incredible mecca. It's where the story of Tampa begins, really. And so what we had in the Plant Museum was all of the original artwork and furniture from the 1890s. So it was this incredible lifestyle museum with all of these great stories. Famous visitors, Thomas Edison and John Philip Sousa and Dame Nellie Melba all stayed there.
Yeah. So, Lindsay, you said in the beginning your background. How did you get into museums as a career?
Sure. So I went to a tiny liberal arts school in St. Petersburg, Eckerd College.
Okay.
Graduated with a degree in history and thought, okay, I'm going to be a college professor, so I got to go get a PhD. And I went to American University and was studying history. And
in D.C.?
Yeah, in D.C. Surrounded by the Smithsonian and Arlington National Cemetery and the National Cathedral, all of these incredible historic places. And I thought, having a PhD sounds kind of like doing homework for the rest of my life. So I think I want to switch to museums instead, because I still get all of the history and the authenticity, but my job is to just get people excited about museums. I've been to many, many museums. I've never been to a boring museum because there are incredible stories at all of them.
See, I thank you for sharing that, because one of the things that we have heard from listeners who listen regularly to this program is that they have people in their own families that at times are searching and trying to figure out, what am I going to do next? And you literally got your eyes popped wide open in Washington, D.C., into this industry that has changed your career path, and here you are now living here. Well, I said earlier, I think you have a dream job, and we've got people listening who both live as residents here in the Pikes Peak region in Colorado Springs, but also people that are thinking about coming here. Like they might even be here on vacation right now and trying to listen to this and figure out what they want to do. So let's begin with talking about why the museum is so unique.
Sure. I've been thinking about this question, and it's almost hard to answer because there's not just one thing that makes it unique. We're really home to the legacy of the Olympics and the Paralympics. We're showcasing America's greatest athletes. When you think Olympics and Paralympics, there's going to be some story, some memory that comes into your mind first. And you're going to see that when you come to the museum, but then you're going to leave talking about these athletes that you'd never heard of before, or sports that you didn't know existed. It's from the very architecture of the building. You can't walk by it and not come in. It's just too amazing. The design is so purposeful. You're gonna really take a trip through history in the museum. You're gonna start in a gallery full of every Olympic torch, which is amazing all on its own. And you move through training and technology and summer games and winter games and medals, and there's just so much to see. The other piece that I think really makes this museum unique is the accessibility and the interactives. So with our interactives, we have an athlete training gallery where you can try your hand at goalball, and you can race on a 30-meter track against an Olympian or Paralympian. And trust me, you're not going to do well.
Right.
I have video of my husband trying that. He was not successful. But there are touchscreens where you can learn even more about your favorite sports, or sports that you didn't know were your favorites until you get into the museum. I mentioned accessibility. Everything in the museum is on a ramp. So you're not going to be separated from your party if you have a mobility issue.
Right.
You're going to move through at your own pace, and you're going to get this incredible story of the Olympic and Paralympic legacy.
I think you just touched on so many great points and features of the museum itself. For me personally, I think the access and the focus, if you will, on Paralympics as well as Olympics has been the eye-opener for me. Like many people, we have our Olympic moments, and depending on your age and how many you have seen or had a chance to, either on TV or been in person, you know those Olympic moments. The Paralympic Games, which to me really kind of gets at the heart and soul of what the Olympic movement really is about. It's about possibilities. It's, the values and what you can dream can happen to you despite having a disability is something that is really showcased. And the other thing that I want listeners to know, if they don't already, is that we are Olympic City, USA. We are branded as such. The Olympic and Paralympic Museum was the absolute cherry on top of the brand. But for those that don't know, in 1978, the U.S. Olympic Committee moved their headquarters from New York City to Colorado Springs. And today they have a large presence in downtown Colorado Springs in their headquarters. And where they had originally moved is now the Olympic and Paralympic Training Center, which is open to the public and for people to be able to come and see as well. But we, in addition to having training centers and headquarters, we have over 26 national governing bodies of sport who call Olympic City, USA their home. So we are very proud of both our history, and we think that there's nowhere else in the world that you can spend a day or two in total Olympic history and future, getting a chance to not only see the Olympic and Paralympic Museum, but the training center. You could go over and see the athletes that are aspiring to make the games and be a part of what we are. Do you have it set up in such a way that people can actually do both the training center and the museum?
I'm not 100% sure on
Okay.
the answer to that.
Okay.
I think there is a combined ticket. I know there used to be. It may still exist.
Okay. So let's talk about what your job is. What is the role that you were hired to focus in on?
So my title is Chief of Content and Integration, which doesn't really tell you a whole lot about what I do.
Right. What does that mean?
So the main part of my job is to keep our content current. I came from a museum where we had a very specific time period, 1891 to 1933. At the Olympic and Paralympic Museum, there is a new games every other year.
Right,
There's
of course.
new heroes, there's new stories, there's new sports. So my job is to keep the content current. So whether that's refreshing our core galleries, our summer and winter galleries, whether that's installing our Paris torch, which is now on display that you can come see,
Good.
along with our Paris medals. And it's also putting together strategies so that we're telling those stories that really are going to mean the most to our audience. And our audience is our visitors from out of town and our visitors who live here in the Pikes Peak region. It's also the athletes. This is their museum. It's for them telling their stories. So we want them to recognize themselves, recognize their struggle and their triumph when they come into the museum. The other piece of that really is building a collection. There are so many incredible objects out there. When you come to the museum, you want to see something that Simone Biles wore at the games.
Sure.
You
Or
wanna,
Peggy Fleming.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and we have Peggy Fleming's dress on
yeah.
display. You can come see that. I'm working on Simone Biles.
Okay.
We'll get there. So building a collection so that we can continue telling these amazing stories, and then ensuring that it's a museum that everyone can be proud of. We want to be adhering to the highest standards across the field. I come at this from a little bit of a different direction. I'm not a member of the movement at this point.
Okay, right.
I'm a museum person.
Yep.
So I'm coming at this from, do we have UV protection on the glass? And is that an acid-free folder that document is in?
Okay.
So ensuring that we're meeting those really gold medal standards across the board.
Well, I guess, for someone like you, how do you must get lots of requests. I mean, though you've only been there 3 months, people, whether it's an athlete or an athlete's family or friends of, they might want to contribute something or ask, how does it work to actually get something on display at the Olympic Museum?
Sure. So there's a couple ways that we do that. One is I have a collection and content committee made up of some of our board members and members of the USOPC and former athletes. And I bring to them, here's a list of all the donation offers that we got in the past month.
Okay.
What do you recommend for us?
And how many do you get in a month? I realize you don't have a lot of months, but like, what's a typical month so far?
I'd say we get probably half a dozen offers a month.
Sure.
And some of them are going to be, if I don't even know, if Jesse Owens' descendant called and said, hey, do you want his medals? I'm going to be able to say yes right off the bat to that. But for other stories, I'm not the subject matter expert yet. I'm the museum person. Right. And so we're going to consider all the opportunities. And it may be something where I'm trying to think of a good example. It may be, maybe we're going to plan an exhibit on wrestling a year from now.
Okay.
And so we want to start sourcing some objects to tell those stories that we may not want to use for a permanent display, but maybe they would work for a temporary exhibit where we're going to take a deeper dive into some of those stories instead.
That's a great answer, because really, in using wrestling just as an example, to say, yes, in 2026, a year from now, we want to have a special exhibit that features wrestling in some way, shape, or form. So now you've got your eye and can do outreach for items that would really make sense to the public. But, okay, so let's just keep going down that path a little bit. How do you know what would actually resonate or be really something special to have on display?
Well, there's a couple different ways that we do that too. One is we do visitor surveys. So we ask
Okay.
our visitors, what did you like? What was missing? What do you want to see next time?
Sure.
Because, they're our audience. That's who we want to hear from. The other thing that we do, I'm working on sort of a Paris retrospective exhibit right now.
Paris retrospective. Yeah.
Kind of what are the top 10 stories from the 2024 games? And I know which ones come to mind for me, but what I did at the recommendation of our CEO was got together a group of about 15 members of our staff and said, okay, what are your top 10 stories? And let's start thinking about it that way. And then we take a look and we make sure, are we equally, not equally, but are we adequately representing Olympic and Paralympic?
Yeah.
And what about sports that don't get a lot of airtime? There may be some great stories there that we don't hear about. For example, the mixed triathlon, there was less than a second, maybe even less than half a second, separating gold from bronze at the end of that race. That's a sport,
Yeah.
I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time watching, to be honest.
Right.
But that sort of story, if I read that in a museum, I'm going to remember that.
Right. So I'm going to suggest that as a result of this podcast that we're going to change your title.
Excellent.
You are the chief storyteller. Aren't you?
I like it.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
like it.
that really is what you do when you look at content. And I just have to think that there will be athletes and other people that will ask you these types of questions that want to know, how do we get in? How,
Right.
because you said it's their museum. And I just think that you have just a dream job. And for people who have not been in this museum yet, we're going to give you a reason to maybe even put some dates on the calendar to think about either coming to visit, or if you happen to live here in Colorado Springs, over the dates of July 10 to 13, 2025, we have the Hall of Fame induction ceremonies that's going to take place. And though, as we're doing this podcast today, we don't know who's going to be inducted yet, we want people to know that on Saturday night, July the 12th, they're going to have inductions into the Hall of Fame, and it's going to be open to the public, right? And which is the first. When we did this the last time, it was not open to the public. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're excited about for your first induction ceremony?
Well, I'm excited about all of it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different pieces. We're really turning this into sort of a Hall of Fame festival that's going to take place over the whole weekend. And some of the events will be open to the public. Some you may need a ticket for. But it's really becoming sort of a citywide celebration. And yes, like you said, we don't know who the inductees will be at this point. We won't find that out for a couple months. So it's going to be a pretty quick turnaround for us to put an exhibit together.
Right.
But the fact that you'll be able to bring your lawn chair or buy a ticket for a closer seat and come and enjoy it and experience this piece of history happening live in Colorado Springs, it's just incredible. I know I keep using that word over and over again, but it's true. There's nowhere else that you can have this type of experience.
Yeah, for the Olympics. It's ironic. I was in Orlando last week at a conference, and I met the lady who runs the Visitor Center and Visitors Bureau in Cooperstown, New York.
Oh, really?
And so I said to her, we here aspire to be in the same sentence, with Cooperstown and Canton, as it relates to both baseball and football. And she said, yeah, how blessed am I to work in a little town where baseball is everything, and the museum has been around since the 30s. I mean, there's pictures of Babe Ruth in the museum, and so I just stood back and thought about it and said, we're still, we just opened July of 2020, which was at the front end of the pandemic. And so for us, we are still building our stories. And I think that when I've seen induction ceremonies on TV in Cooperstown and in Canton, that for us, this is going to be a chance for us to really build our footprint in a national and international way for people who are going to want to come and see what makes it so special here.
For sure, for sure. If I can share, Cooperstown is a very special place for me. My dad and I took a road trip from St. Pete, Florida, to Cooperstown, New York.
Wow.
For my 21st birthday. That was what I wanted to do, and so I understand sort of that magic of getting to have that experience. And I understand that at the last Hall of Fame induction, the Olympic and Paralympic Hall of Fame induction, Michael Phelps was so impressed with the museum that he pushed his flight back a day so that he could spend more time exploring the exhibits.
Yeah.
So I think we will get there.
Yes, we
will get there.
We have it, we have built it, and they will come.
They will come.
We are inviting you to come, and inviting you listening locally to invite your friends and family to come and see what makes us so special. All right, so before I let you go, there's an exciting event happening with Visit Colorado Springs and Locomotive Party Bus later this month. Visit COS and the Locomotive are teaming up to host the Booze and Brews Bus Cruise, a journey to some of the Springs' best local craft beverage establishments. With rides on February 8th and February 22nd, this is the perfect way to discover the spots that make Colorado Springs truly special. You can buy your tickets at locomotivebus.com. Let me spell that. LOCALMOTIVEBUS.com. Okay, so Lindsay, you have been here 3 months. Mm-hmm. All right. We have 3 questions that we like to ask all of our guests. So, first one is, in 3 words, how would you describe Colorado Springs?
Just 3 words. Okay. I'm going to go with vibrant.
Okay.
I don't know. Vibrant, fun, and special.
Special. You must have felt invited.
I did feel invited, yes.
when you came, not even thinking that this is where you were going to be moving, but okay, got it. Okay, so in your 3 months, I keep saying in 3 months because it impacts the way you answer these questions, but have you found your own little hidden gem, a place that you like to go, you and your husband might like to go, whether it's an outdoor place? What's your go-to little hidden gem place?
So I'm still soliciting recommendations,
Okay.
but the 2 that I've really enjoyed the most so far, aside from the museum,
Mm-hmm.
are probably Red Rocks Canyon.
Yes.
We've gone there a couple times when the weather has cooperated. We're
Yeah.
from Florida. And the other is probably Bristol Brewing.
Bristol Brewing. Okay, sure, over at Ivywild.
Yep.
Okay, yep, great. Now, this last question, we could go on for the rest of the afternoon and talk about this, but most people who come have like a bucket list. There's something that they want to do. And you were here last summer and got to be on vacation and did that up in Denver as well. What's next on your bucket list of something you and your husband want to go do that you haven't gotten to do yet?
Oh, gosh, that is a really long list.
I
One thing that we had to really rush through when we were here over the summer was, I think it was called Paint Mines.
The paint mines, yes, out in Calhoun.
That was incredible, and I didn't know what to expect. I was on the Visit COS website and saw this as a park to go to and thought, all right, well, we'll give it a try. And
Okay.
it just took my breath away.
Yeah, it is so unique, and it's still there waiting for you. I would encourage you to go back to the paint mines. To go back to the paint mines, because it's really nowhere else do you see something like that. It's in Calhoun. It's probably a 40-minute drive from downtown Colorado Springs, and it's on our Visit COS website. But I love the fact that you only get a taste of it. And what really, in wrapping this up, what reminds me of maybe advice that we can give people is take it from Michael Phelps. Like, you can't just do it and like swim through or
Right.
run through the museum and be able to experience it. So first, let's give the website and how people can follow and learn about the museum, and then anything you'd really like people to know in wrapping up.
Well, the website is usopm.org, so United States Olympic and Paralympic Museum. As for something to wrap up, I would say if you haven't been to the museum, today's a great day to go.
Right.
If you have been to the museum, come back. There's
Yeah.
new things, new games every other year. Every other year, we have just amazing stories waiting to share with you.
Yeah, I think it's really well said, because like you, I enjoy going to museums. This one is living and breathing and changing. And so, yes, if you live here and you've been, Paris is now here,
Yeah.
you know? And so, Lindsay, thank you very much for sitting with us. And I welcome you again to Olympic City, USA. We are really fortunate to have you here with this experience that you bring to this. And if anybody at the museum is listening, we have renamed her title Chief Storyteller. Thanks, Lindsay.
My pleasure.